This is about the biggest roadblock that has hit industry in a generation at least.
We went from, hey, the future's bright and we're about to explode, to how long can we survive on the amount of cash that we have?
You guys were experiencing growth. You had identified a problem in the marketplace. You'd done the necessary research to find out where it was. You had the culture ready to go. You had the systems in place, the data going, and then all of a sudden, global pandemic.
I guess entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. You have to have a certain level of risk tolerance to do it, but it could also be the most rewarding thing that you ever do by taking that chance on yourself and believing in yourself, and then really getting people to buy into a mission is something that's really fulfilling to me as a business owner.
So what is the most important component to ensuring that your business is successful? Is it the skill sets that the employees have, or is it the corporate culture that is formed? We're gonna be discussing that today with BJ Werzyn of West Shore Home. BJ, where did you grow up? And before any of this started, before West Shore Home was what it is today, what was young BJ like?
So, your typical middle-class upbringing in Western Pennsylvania, a small town called Johnstown. My parents had a very small window and door manufacturing company that, quite frankly, didn't really have much interest in joining or being a part of growing up. It wasn't cool. It wasn't, kind of my thing. I wanted to really go out and, kind of stake my own claim and do my own thing.
It wasn't what every little boy dreamed of doing one day.
Not so much.
So, all right, so you decide to go a different path. You go to college. What do you study?
So I went to Penn State. I was always kind of interested in mechanical drafting, architecture, engineering. So I went to Penn State for aerospace engineering.
So you're good at math, or what's the?
I was good at math, but not quite good enough, because once I kind of got to the end of my junior year and all the math became letters instead of numbers, I kind of realized that probably aerospace engineering wasn't going to be my thing either. So I graduated in 4 years with my degree, and I was exploring different grad schools to go to. But at the time, the family business had expanded. They had taken on a partner from Europe, they had expanded their product lines, and we're starting a manufacturing operation out of the Tampa, St. Pete area. So one of my brothers was going down there to help them get that started. They asked me if I would help join, so I got sucked into the family business. I really got to see all aspects of the construction and building products industry. So obviously I saw the distribution of the building products with the manufacturing of the windows and doors. We worked a lot with architects and builders on the new construction side, but we also did some direct-to-consumer stuff on the residential remodeling. And that's what really kind of interested me the most, was working directly with the end consumer.
Okay, so why is that? Because a lot of people would look at that and say, okay, you would think, outside looking in, you're set up to do manufacturing, you can sell to all of these kind of big distributors and things like that. You don't got to deal with individual customers, but you wanted to deal with individual customers. Like, why?
First of all, I thought the impact on the customer experience could be more dramatic, going directly to the end consumer. The idea of kind of this data-driven marketing and sales system was more interesting to me, rather than kind of doing these B2B sales. And then I also noticed the big problem that we had in our society of this terrible customer experience when it comes to remodeling your home. So I thought that was a more interesting problem to tackle than staying on the wholesale distribution side of the thing.
How did you go through that process of understanding that as being a major problem within the marketplace, and then going about addressing it when you didn't have any formal education in that field?
I recognized the problem, the terrible customer experience. People put off home remodeling because it's a headache at best, a nightmare at worst. So I didn't necessarily understand the size and the scope of the problem. I just realized there was a problem that needed to be solved. The remodeling industry is almost a $500 billion annual industry. The consumer food services business, or the restaurant industry, is like $444 billion. Same size. So the average American spends about the same amount of money every year eating out as they do remodeling their home. Again, we could sit here the rest of the day and name national brands in the restaurant categories, national brands in shoes, national brands in apparel, but you can't name one national remodeling company. It was an important problem because people's homes are their most valuable possessions. If they're not their most valuable possessions, for most, it's at least their most intimate possession. It's where they raise their families, it's where they make their memories. But when it comes to fixing up their homes, there's just no good solution out there.
So you've identified the problem. How did you go about working out potential solutions? Like, were there any solutions that you thought of initially where you ended up ditching them or they didn't work? Or like, how did you go about that process?
A little bit of trial and error at first. I thought the way I might be able to help people was being able to do it the most affordable way possible. So I went out and, we really focused on window and door replacement when we first started. So I went out and I found a good product that wasn't overly expensive. And I hired some subcontractors to go out and install the windows. And after we did our first several jobs, I got a few calls from the customers and they said, can you come out here and check this out? So I went out to the home and they said, it seems like these windows are just as drafty as our old windows that you took out. And they actually didn't really clean up that well. There was sawdust and cigarette butts in the driveway. And in fact, I think they forgot to caulk a few on the back of the house. They really seemed like they were in a rush to get out of here in the afternoon. And that's when I realized, trying to do it for, the most affordable, least expensive way was not going to solve that problem that we had just talked about of this terrible customer experience. So I did a 180-degree pivot at that point. And I said, I'm going to go out and find the most energy efficient window I can find. I'm going to hire my own installers. We're going to write SOPs to dictate, the process all the way through cleanup at the end. We're going to have our own trucks. We're going to put them in uniforms and do it differently than everybody else in the industry was doing it at the time and still today, which is to use subcontractors and kind of outsource that last mile.
See, okay, that's also crazy to me because the amount of risk you're taking on it's I would assume the reason why you did this initially with subcontractors is that it's relatively non-committal to where I can take in orders when they come in and then I find the appropriate subcontractors and I do that. But you're not paying full-time staff, benefits, healthcare, all this. Now you're taking on people. These aren't 1099s. Like, you're taking on full-time employees to do all of this. And if you don't got work for them, that represents a huge risk for you.
Absolutely.
So it was that important to provide that customer experience that you were willing to assume that level of risk for the amount of growth you guys wanted.
And that's why most home improvement companies today still outsource that, because to your point, I only have to give them work when I have it. I can put the burden on the subcontractor to buy their own trucks, pay for their own gas, get their own insurance, hire a helper. If they're subcontracted, I don't have to provide workers' compensation for them. I don't have to provide benefits or health care or 401k. So it's a lot less expensive to do it that way from the company's standpoint. But again, you have no control over the quality. You have no control over the customer experience whenever you're outsourcing it to a sub.
We talk about the concept of extreme ownership. Tell me a little bit about what influenced you to develop the corporate culture you have, and what led you to develop that particular culture.
So I got a team of employees together, kind of a wide swath from the executive team, from frontline management, frontline employees, marketing and sales, operations. And we really sat down and worked on a few things. What's the core purpose of the company? And we did that by asking, first of all, what we do. Well, we remodel people's homes. And then why is that important? So you keep asking why and digging deeper and deeper. So why is it important that you're fixing up people's homes? Well, they're the most valuable, most intimate possessions. We can make them more energy efficient. We can make them safer. We can increase the curb appeal. We can increase the value. And ultimately, it came down to bringing happiness to every home. So that's a core purpose here, bringing happiness to every home. And we look at that both ways, both to our external customers, bringing happiness to those homes that we're remodeling and making better, and also for our internal customers, our employees, that we're hopefully bringing happiness to their home by giving them a great place to work, by challenging them every day to be the best version of themselves, and by being able to supply, provide them with all those things that we just talked about, a good income, all the benefits, things like that.
One of the things you just said I thought was interesting. Every branding exercise I think I've ever been through had maybe top-level executives, top-level management, maybe if we were lucky, some mid-level management, maybe. never had people on the front lines actually doing a lot of the technical work, right? The technicians that were responsible for carrying out whatever the executives were coming up with. So first of all, why did you guys choose to do that? And what did you guys discover between what you thought at the executive level or even the senior management level versus what you were seeing at the ground level?
So a culture isn't a group of executives sitting around in a room saying, these sound like good values that we can put on a poster and hang on the wall. To me, your culture is the observable behaviors of the people in the company. So that's why we wanted to bring in frontline management to really ask the tough questions of, hey, these are what we define as our core values, but does the personality of the organization, the way people are behaving, does that align with extreme ownership, be great at what you do, get better every single day, exceptional teammates, do the right thing? So we really wanted to make sure that the personality of the organization was aligned with our core values, and that ultimately was our brand promise to the community.
And so that's a mindset. You guys are looking for that because again, you're not relying on a bunch of subcontractors to do this work for you. You are going out there and getting full-time employees. So how do you find people that really have that kind of drive? Because, I mean, let's face it, culturally, we kind of seem to have a problem right now in the country with this idea of people don't want to necessarily be driven. So how do you find people that are just determined to do this and are like hungry for it?
I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. I just don't subscribe to the fact that like nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody wants to be pushed. Everybody wants, a free ticket, a free meal. So it's very, very intentional throughout the entire process, right? Starting with the phone screen when somebody applies for a job here. Last year, our recruiting team sourced 178,000 new applications. So 178,000 people applied for a job at West Shore Home last year. Of those 178,000, 10,000 got an interview. And of those 10,000, we offered about 3,000. So the point I'm trying to make is not the big numbers. They're big numbers, but we're still very discerning on who we bring into the organization. 178,000 people applied for a job, 3,000 got an offer.
What are some of the things you're looking for in those interviews?
So we really try to hire for culture. We really try to hire for values, and then we can train for skill. So I don't necessarily need someone to show up with a resume that says, I've been installing Windows for 20 years, I'm a great window installer, and we're just gonna hire them. If they've been doing it the wrong way for the past 20 years, that's not necessarily someone we want to bring in, but we went from $40 million in top line revenue in 2018 to $400 million last year. So that's 10X in 3 years.
That's incredible.
Trust me when I tell you that culture is not for everybody,
yeah.
Right? High paced, high growth, full speed every single day, coming in here, giving your all, and then leaving and going home at night and saying, all right, I gave my best today, and I'm gonna show up tomorrow and get after it again, as opposed to I'm gonna go find a job where I can just clock in and hide in my cubicle and no one's gonna bother me. We would rather have people that want to be challenged and want to be pushed.
You look for culture and value. So obviously that brings value to the company. How does it also bring value to the employee?
So we have a very large recruiting team that's constantly bringing in new employees. But what we have is that's even bigger than that is our training and development department. So we have training centers across the country that train for those skills that I talked about, right? Install training, training new plumbers and sales training and things like that. But then we have an entire leadership development department as well that do Management 101 and Management 201 and Leadership 101 and Leadership 201. And we invest a ton of money and time and resources into the employees because, again, when you're spending all that time up front to hire people that fit the culture and fit the values, if we can give them those skill sets, that's the employee that we want, and that's the employee that wants to be here.
So you'll take the values over the skill sets every day of the week?
Every day of the week.
You talked about where you were at and where you've come in just 3 years. And I noticed that there was this little event that happened within that 3-year period that should have made what you guys did impossible. And that's obviously COVID. So again, You guys were experiencing growth. You'd identified a problem in the marketplace. You'd done the necessary research to find out where it was. You had the culture ready to go. You had the systems in place, the data going. And then all of a sudden, global pandemic. What did that mean for you guys?
We went from, hey, the future's bright and we're about to explode, to how long can we survive on the amount of cash that we have? And I started to look at the landscape. We're a big media company, so a lot of our advertising is done on TV. And a lot of the other big advertisers on TV are these large box retailers, whether it's an auto dealer, furniture store, that spend tons of money on advertising. So I thought about it and I thought, well, they're all shut down. And they're all gonna be pulling their ad buys from the TV stations. And it looks like this kind of stay-at-home thing is gonna be here for the foreseeable future, and people are gonna be working from home, and people are gonna be schooling their kids from home, and they're probably not gonna be traveling this summer. So the likelihood is that they're probably gonna wanna fix up these homes because they're gonna be spending so much time. So our media team went out and bought millions and millions of dollars of TV buys for 20 cents, 25 cents on the dollar, and the inquiries came flooding in, right? It was eye-opening, just the amount of people that were interested in home improvement all of a sudden when they kind of had the same realization that I did is, hey, we're gonna be stuck in our homes for a while.
Yeah. That's incredible. So you guys turned a situation that should have been catastrophic, and you found the opportunity within it. And as a result, and this is the part that, again, I keep hammering home on this because I think there's a misunderstanding about the role entrepreneurs play, right? You've got a technician that's doing a really good job at building or providing a good or service. You've got a manager that's really good at managing all the technicians. But then you've got an entrepreneur that's constantly looking for opportunities and for roadblocks. And this is about the biggest roadblock that has hit industry in a generation at least. But you guys actually found opportunities within it.
Well, the biggest challenge with COVID was a couple of things. First of all, it was sudden, right? So right now we're looking at the economic environment, and we know that tough times are ahead. So you have a little time to plan and prepare for that. COVID wasn't here yesterday, and boom, it's on your front door today. And then the second thing about it was something that we had never dealt with before. So there wasn't a playbook that you could go to and be like, all right, what did we do in the last pandemic that's going to work during this pandemic? So we're in completely uncharted territories that fell on us instantaneously. And I took a huge risk. And it could have not worked out, right? It could have been disastrous. The best thing that came out of COVID, though, was the culture of this company really shined through, right? People were scared, right? Sending them home with a laptop and a computer and a phone, that wasn't exciting to them. Like, oh boy, I get to go work from home. They're like, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Am I going to have health insurance tomorrow? So when we came out and said, look, nobody's getting laid off. We're not going to furlough anybody. Everybody's going to keep their health insurance. We're going to get aggressive. We're going to try to take advantage of this situation to, help people that are going to be spending more time in their home. And you're always, delivering these culture and these value messages, but you're never quite sure, is it actually sinking in? Are people actually buying in? And, the people came up with this hashtag WSH, West Shore Home Strong. And everybody rallied around the organization, and you saw this extreme ownership kind of culture just come shining through. And it's probably one of my proudest moments as the owner of this company.
All right, well, BJ, thank you for giving us a lot of your valuable time today to talk about this. Tell everyone real quick where they can learn more, because again, my wife is already telling me wait, you're gonna go talk to someone that does bathroom remodeling? Where can they learn more about what West Shore Home does?
Yeah, go to westshorehome.com. You can also visit us on any of our social media pages. If you're interested in employment opportunities, you'll definitely want to check out our career site or our LinkedIn page.
So if you want to join a company with a culture that is constantly striving to not only be better at what they do, but to make you better at what you do, West Shore Home is one of the places you should probably check out. Once again, BJ, thank you very much. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next episode.